Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to do something just a bit different than we've done in the past. Usually, I'm the one that interviews and asks questions, and then we have some dialogue that goes along with it. Today, however, what we're going to jump into is actually someone's going to be interviewing me. I've had several people ask, what's my story? How did I get to where I am? So we thought, no better to have come and interview me than Joel Stedman. He was a previous guest on one of our episodes, and he's an awesome guy. We're so excited to have him that he would do this. So what we'll be talking about today is not just that with my accident where I fell 40 feet and broke bones. There was a lot more to it than that. From the doctor saying that I really wasn't going to be able to walk again and how I got through that. Today, I'm opening up about the journey that I had, sometimes in darkness and actually all the way through, and those individuals that had a direct impact often on how that happened. Even a story about an 11-year-old boy when I was 11. It's not the story about me. It's about another 11-year-old boy. His name is Michael, and he helped me see the world differently. So this story is mostly about resilience, community, and finding strength in unexpected places. And I am inviting you to join me right now to hear a story that you will not forget. Well, welcome again to Double Helix, where we unravel the science of connections. Today, we're going to flip the script a little bit. I've invited Joel back, and actually we're here because of Joel. At the end of our last episode, maybe it was when we were done recording, Joel had mentioned that in episodes we keep referring to my accident and referring to those things and never go into detail. And he suggested that somebody interview me and to go into details. I told Joel I'd be happy to do that. However, he would have to do the interview, and of course, then he informed me that I'm not allowed to ask questions myself, only because he figures I'll flip the script back on him and make him talk about himself. So I'm going to try my best to not do that today. So those of you that don't remember Joel and I have known each other for about 20 years, and he was very much around when the accident happened. So I'm anxious to kind of see where our conversation goes. In some ways I know, in some ways I don't. So Joel, I'm going to turn it over to you. You're running the show this time.
I'm so glad. I thought, like you said, after the last time we were together, in my mind, I thought, wait, everybody needs to know Mark. Like, you're doing such a great job with some great interviews and some great sessions and podcasts. But I don't know how many people kind of know the essence of who you are and what makes you as a person. I've actually been one of the lucky people to have a pretty close to front row seat on your life over the last 20 years, and just the tremendous changes that you've had, the resilience and perseverance in your life that you show. And so I thought, man, we got to have this audience as they grow to know you better and listen to the podcast. They need to know the guy asking the questions. And so I'm really excited about it. It's going to be super fluid. For the record, Mark did send me some questions to ask, and a couple of them tried to refer back to talking about me, and I'm not going to ask them. So this will not be a Joel session by any stretch.
Which ones referred back to you?
The second question was very specific. So it's a goner. I mean, first and foremost, I'd really love if you would spend a minute and tell everybody about your accident, but I'd like you to start from just getting up that morning and just kind of go from there, not the exact moment, but just tell us kind of about the day and go through that, if you will.
Yeah. And if it's all right, I'm going to rewind about a week earlier, a couple weeks earlier.
That would be great.
And the reason is, so we had a home in Pleasant Grove, Utah, and it had the home builder had put in around the home spruce trees when he built the home. And I think, if I remember right, it was built in 1951 or 1952. These are 65, 70 foot tall spruce trees. And they're great for shade, right? But my wife and I really enjoyed flowers and plants and things. And so they were actually causing too much shadow for the types of plants that we wanted to have there. And so my wife wanted 2 trees gone, which were on the back part of the lot. One was on the east corner and one was on the west corner. And so I did the smart guy thing initially and called a tree guy out. And the tree guy came out and he gave me a bid. And I thought that is the most
It was
stupid
probably
amount of money.
outrageous.
Yeah, to just to cut the trees down, leave the wood, and not grind the stumps. I thought, why, right? And I had a chainsaw and I had gear and I had everything. So I thought, I told my wife, I said, I'm just going to take care of it. Yeah, I mean, I was a wildland firefighter for almost 9 years, and I was a sawyer, which is the guy that cuts trees down. And so I had a decent handle on what to do and how to do it. And so I called a couple people in my neighborhood and said, "Hey," and they heated their homes with wood, and I'm like, "If you come help me, you can have it all." Right? Two trees that size has a lot of wood in it.
Yeah.
And so they didn't hesitate. The first tree we did was on the west side of the house, which was about a week before the accident. And it was, I'm going to be honest with you, not patting myself on the back at all, but it was perfection. I mean, we couldn't fell a tree in the neighborhood because you live in a neighborhood, right? You have to bring it down in pieces, and it
Right.
could not have gone better. And so it was awesome. I mean, we got it right down to the stump and everything. And so, a week goes by, and to everybody knows, it was April 26th of 2008. And that morning I remember getting up and I remember going to Home Depot that morning, which I swear I might as well have taken a mortgage out because we spent so much money. We had remodeled the entire house room to room almost except
I
for the
remember
kitchen.
that.
We'd
Yeah.
touched every single room in the house but the kitchen. And so I'd gone to Home Depot, and then on my way back to the house, I knew that the young men in our neighborhood had just gotten home from a fathers and sons. And so a father and sons camp out. To those of you that don't know what fathers and sons is, but it's a fathers and sons camp out that we do in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's typically every congregation has at least one they do a year. And so I didn't go. And so I just drove past a couple of the guys' houses. We're visiting for a few minutes. How did the camp out go? That just the normal,
Yeah.
how was the bonfire? Because it's young men, so there's going to be a ton of
Sticks
fire.
everywhere in that
Right. Oh
fire.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's a nightmare.
So, and at that point, I think I got home probably 9 or 9:30 in the morning, maybe as late as 10. It's somewhere in that range. And what I did was I just, I put my harness on and I emptied my pockets and put it on the table because the harness just bound in on the frame. I mean, you've got stuff in your pockets. That's just pain points.
Digging. Yeah.
And so got all that set and went over and started working on the second tree. I'd already started, but I mean, today was the day I was going to top it and bring it down in pieces. And so, as I was going up the tree, I was leaving about, 4 inches of the tree limb left on the tree. Because if you think of a spruce tree, I mean, the branches just come out all over the place. There's not really an easy way to climb up the tree, so you have to just remove the branches. So I'm removing the branches all the way around the tree, leaving some stumps so that I had footholds, handholds, someplace for the harness stuff to hang on to, everything, and I was actually, I didn't realize that I was as high as I was. But I'm really, really fortunate that a couple things that morning. Number one, my wife did not see the accident. While she was in the yard, she had turned her back and was looking over at where we had just removed the other tree and was thinking about plants and flowers and the things that, that we would put over there. And I was 40 feet up in the tree, and the chainsaw damaged the harnessing and it failed. And so I free fell 40 feet to the ground. Now, it's not like step one, do this to
far
survive.
is 40 feet? How many stories? Like, I don't.
It's 4 stories.
4 stories out of a 4-story
Typically
building.
about 4 stories. Yeah. So, high enough, it gives me the shivers still when
I'll bet.
and when I'm about that high and look down, now I'm like, right.
Yeah, I'll bet.
But it's not like you think step one, here's the steps that I'm going to do to survive this fall. There's no time to think there's anything. And when you're in a harness, you're actually, let me just use this hand because this one doesn't work right. And we'll talk about that later. When you're in a harness, you're kind of leaning back, right? You're not standing straight up. You're kind of at a little bit of lean back. And so, as all of a sudden it began to fall, you're going to fall down backwards, just straight down. Well, the first thing I did was throw the saw out of my hands. It wasn't a step one, throw a saw. It was just it was just instant clear my hands. And by doing so, that stood me up. With every action, there's an
Yeah, to
opposite and equal
throw it.
reaction,
Yeah.
right? So since I threw the saw over my right shoulder, it stood me up, and I actually over rotated a little bit, which in itself was a blessing because, and I'll explain why when we start talking surgeries. So I landed more on my left side with my left leg making the initial impact, and I just crumpled down into some of the branches that I'd been cutting off, right? So these weren't fluffy. This was nothing about that. And it was hard packed earth that had been there for 50 years. And it's in an area of Utah that, I mean, I used to joke that if you dig a 5-gallon bucket size hole, you have 5 gallons of rock.
It's true.
Right.
You're on
It's
the
so
mountain,
rocky in
really.
that area,
Yeah.
right? And so it was, I landed on hard packed earth. It knocked me out. I mean, I was totally unconscious. But the strange thing for me was, it was almost like a computer rebooting, right? So when you turn your computer on, one system comes on, then another comes on, then another comes on.
Right.
Right. And the first thing I realized the first thing I can tell you, there was consciousness, right? All of a sudden it was like, okay, wait, I mean, everything was black. I couldn't see or do anything. I just laying there and it was blackness. And I realized that I had consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in reality, to be honest with you, I didn't know if it was, I was still alive or I was now gone and I had consciousness, right? It was
I'm
just
not
one of
so
those.
sure you want that dark feeling if you're
No,
on the
exactly
other side.
right. If you got the dark in consciousness, that's a whole different
That was
story.
a bad day, man.
And so, then the next thing that came on was, it was interesting step by step. And I can tell you, because I just remember being acutely aware, was my hearing came in.
Hmm.
And so then all of a sudden I could hear, and I'm laying there, and of course I'm laying on my back now and my head is looking straight up. Now I landed in an area in the one spot that I could land and survive.
Hmm.
We had about a 2-foot stone wall that went around. So if you come around, it kind of comes around, and I landed right in the middle. So it comes around me, and there's the tree right here. And I landed in about a 4-foot space with a stone wall around me and a chain link fence behind me. And it's the one spot that I could have, if I'd have been anywhere, either direction, I would have
You
hit
hit
rock.
that cement wall, everything's different.
Yeah. And so then the next thing that came on, I say came online, but that's kind of what I felt like it was.
Mm.
I'm laying down there, and it was the easiest way to describe it is if you have a camera and you're totally out of focus and everything is as blurry as you can make it. And then all of a sudden it dials in, right? And it dials in, and I'm looking straight up this tree, and I'm still trying to make sense of everything.
What happened?
And this is where, I mean, that's all just, this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And this is where it gets hard. My wife is standing on the other side of the yard. She was turning or turned about just after I fell. So she's looking at me trying to figure out how I got down there from up there so quickly.
Yeah.
So her brain's trying to make sense of it. And about that moment is when the next system of mine came online, which happened to have been the pain receptors. And that was
insane.
Oh my gosh. I can't even begin to go to detail about how bad that was. And she had her head on her straight enough. She comes running right over to me. And I remember still, my brain's not in the right place. You're going to laugh when I say this, though. My brain's not in the right place. And she comes over, what do I do? What do I do? And I said, call Dave Larson. Dave Larson was, just so that everybody knows, Dave Larson was my immediate manager and Joel was my VP. And so, it was one of those, call Dave Larson.
Don't worry about 911. Let's just make sure and give work a phone call.
I got to give work a call, right? That's right. So
typical.
She just totally blew that off, obviously, right? And we had a neighbor that lived, and then, well, she got in my face and she's like, what do I do? What do I do? And I told her, I'm like, shock is going to come fast. I'm an old firefighter medic. And I'm just like, it's going to come, and I need to get covered up. And so she ran out inside, and the first thing she could grab was our really expensive down comforter. That's the first thing that she could grab. And she comes running outside with that and just covers me up with this. Because I mean, that's all I could think to do. I couldn't move.
Mhm.
So, she's just doing what she could. We had, fortunately, a neighbor on the east side of our home that was having some remodeling done, and someone in our local, one of our local congregations happened to be right there. He's a construction guy. And so he immediately called 911. And in that process, we had neighbors vaulting fences
I'm sure.
and coming and running. And there's some stuff that I'll still hold pretty sacred that happened during this time period. That I don't want to share on the podcast per se, but I'm happy to share in more of a one-on-one type situation. But needless to say, fortunately for us, we had neighbors there that were there very quickly.
Uh-huh.
We had a neighbor that was there. For those of you that watched the episode with Chandler, which was several weeks ago, at the very end of that episode, there's that 8-minute video that we posted, and that goes into some of the details of the accident just a little bit, right? And one of the guys that's on there, named Jason, he lived a half a block away, and he heard the fall.
Mhm.
And he came running because he knew I was working on the tree. He came running, vaulted the fence, and was there. Fortunately, because the local fire department in Pleasant Grove, they had already just been on a call, and they were on their way back to the station. And so they had passed our house 2-3 minutes before the call came. And all they did was turn around and come right back to the house. And so I still remember, while they're poking and prodding, the pain was so intense that I still remember the medic, the main medic that was there, the paramedic. She had to keep calling the hospital because they weren't getting on top of the pain, because they can only administer so much without a physician.
A person, yeah.
And so she called a couple times. We're not there yet. And they kept putting more and more on board. And until finally, it calmed it down just enough that it wasn't just freaking me out. I still remember telling the medic as they were trying to assess, I said, I think there's a stick poking in my leg. Well, it wasn't a stick in my leg. It was something coming out of my leg.
Out of your leg, yeah.
Yeah. And when I looked down, I mean, having been medic, I looked down and I'm like, oh, never mind. It's the other way. I stumbled across a few months ago. I don't know who it was, but somebody took a picture of what my left leg looked like. They ground transported me. They wanted to life flight me, but that didn't work out because of timing wise and things like that. And so they ground transported me to American Fork Hospital. And at that time period, American Fork Hospital was this teeny tiny. Yeah. They had an emergency room, but anything beyond serious first aid had to go to a hospital. And they wheel me in there, and I mean, literally, they were just kind of like, no.
I'm sure.
I was so beat up. But somebody had taken a picture. Someone was holding my leg, or it was supported, and my lower leg just like the upside down golden arches. I mean, there was no shape or form to it. When I saw that a few months ago, I just kind of got the willies. It was like, oh my gosh, it was so bad.
I'm sure.
Then
okay, I'm gonna move you along just a little bit, because I want you to give kind of the physical ramifications, what happened, and then I want to jump into the aftermath and how things went and some of the things I was able to see you do. But tell them kind of what happened really quickly.
So, from my left knee down, it was so broken up that when they finally got it rebuilt, they talked about amputation.
Yeah,
I was all for amputation. My attitude was like, just cut it off, right? If it's that bad, just take it off. And we didn't, because my wife, she was like, well, wait a second, you can't take that decision back, right? So if later
I was there for that part.
Yeah, later down the road, you might change your mind. But by the time they finished that, I had 22 plates, 22 screws and 8 plates from my knee to my ankle. to put, I jokingly call myself Humpty Dumpty. So to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, it took a total of 13 surgeries.
And
Everything
didn't
from
wasn't
legs to shoulders to, I mean, it was, yeah.
Didn't your primary physician, the person who was doing the most work on you, kind of say you're never going to walk again? Like, wasn't that kind of prognosis at the end of it all pretty gloomy?
The neurologist is the one who said that. Dr. Hilliard, who put me back together, who sadly, everyone, he's retired. So you've lost the best trauma orthopedic guy in
You've
Salt
spoken
Lake.
so
He's
highly of
retired.
him forever. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, right? I talk much about him, I'm gonna start crying. I'm gonna be honest with you. And so the neurologist, I remember, I finally convinced them to do a nerve conduction test because things just weren't progressing. And he finally came out, and that's when he said, you're not gonna get enough nerve growth because there's so much nerve damage. And that was a pretty dark day. I remember coming out to my truck, and I called my wife, and I just said, I am so tired of hearing bad news, right? It just seems like every conversation I have with a doctor is bad news. I said, I am so tired of hearing the bad news. This is what they're saying. And it was hard to wrap my head around. Right. But we had a conversation, and it was, this is kind of the hand we've been dealt. And what are we going to do? How are we going to manage it? And that began the turnaround of, all right, I can sit in this really dark hole where I was feeling that particular day, or I can figure something else out.
Yeah, I wanted to dig a little bit there because I was close enough to you to kind of be aware of what was going on, and my brain could only think worst case scenarios. Like, I couldn't wrap my head around. I knew you as this hunter, like you're similar to my older brother before you just never stopped talking hunting, which, let's be honest, is super annoying to non-hunters.
For someone who was not a hunter.
I didn't care about stands in trees or anything, but we talked about it a lot. And so as I was trying to work through my brain this change in your life, it was really hard from a spectator spot. And within a really short time, you were in a chair and you were training for marathons and things like that. I want to capture a couple of things. I want to talk to me about where this resilience, came from, where this I'm going to face this adversity and I'm going to be resilient, and not just in the fact that you're going to stay alive, but that you're going to thrive. And where did that come from? And kind of what was that process to even get to that point? Because you did it remarkably fast, in my opinion. I think somebody might go 2, 3, 4 years and then say, okay, I'm going to quit being sad for myself. Tell me about that and just why.
Yeah.
I mean, who was it? How were you raised to so quickly turn that page?
There were 2 or 3 things that I can think of offhand that had an impact in it. Number one, without a doubt, it was the way my folks raised us. I have an amazing mom and dad, and they, I don't always get along with my parents.
Yeah.
I'm what my mother calls her hermit son. And because I can be quiet for months, and it's not that I dislike or don't want to talk. It's just, that's just my personality, which is strange. I host a podcast, right? But
On Connections, I might add.
That's on Connections. That's right. But I think the first thing is my parents and the way they raised us. We were raised to, I mean, if you fell, and I remember more than once hearing my dad say, he was an officer in the Army. My younger years growing up, and it was like, are you bleeding? Well, then just get up and keep going. Right. It was that kind of mentality. Yeah. But other than my parents, I think there were 2 people that had an impact on that. The first happened when I was really young. I had a rare bone disease called leg calf Perthes. And it actually affects your hips. And so my right hip actually ended up with this fairly rare disease. And it's where the bone blood supply is cut off to a portion of the ball of the hip. And it's only cut off for a few weeks, but then that bone dies. And so then it has to regenerate. And mine was bad enough that I ended up in the hospital for a while when I was 10, 11 years old. When
I
we get to
actually
the hospital,
remember when we worked together, it's still hurting. Like
oh yeah,
as I knew you, you had hip pain.
yeah, by the time you and I had met, I had already had my hip replaced
Mm,
because of it.
mm,
Um, so in the hospital, I'm laying there, and and I even asked my mother, years ago, and she said, "You were an angry kid." I hated everything, I mean, where I'm laying in this hospital bed, they've got me in traction on both legs. I'm an 11-year-old whining and moaning and just
yeah,
normal, right?
yeah,
Normal stuff. And then one day they this was back in the day when it was a hospital ward, right? So you had 4 to 6 kids in a room,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so that those of you who don't know, this was 1977, 78. Okay. And so they wheel this kid into the bed next to me. And now, I can't forget this kid. He had one arm was shriveled up and just tiny, and he had 2 little nasty shriveled up legs. He wore a back brace, a full, I mean, from his armpits to his pelvis. He had a colostomy bag, a catheter bag. Yeah, I mean, it was just
yeah.
he was in a bad spot. His name was Michael. And to Michael, the sky was blue, the grass is green. Isn't it a wonderful day? He'd never known what it was like I did, to go outside and play and run and do all the stuff that outdoor people do, right? But to him, it was amazing. And I remember at 11 years old looking over at this kid. We were both the same age. And there was just something that clicked in me that went, you know what? As bad as I have it, somebody else has it worse, right? I can't in my mind say I'm gonna complain loudly and
It's an
everybody's gonna
important
know.
lesson, right? That's amazing to have that lesson as an 11-year-old.
Yeah, and it stuck with me, right? And then around that same time period, in one of our church magazines, there was an article about a wheelchair athlete by the name of Kurt Brinkman,
Mm,
um, from Shelley, Idaho, and he was a double amputee, and he had just finished. He had just won the gold medal, right, in Paralympics. And I'm reading this article, and the doctors had already told me at 11, because of my hip, I may end up one day having to use a wheelchair, right? And at that age, around that age, I'm reading that article about Kurt, and I went, if I'm ever in a chair, that's what I want to be like. And so between my parents, Michael, and Kurt, I'm be honest with you, just like anyone, I had dark days. I had
of
struggles.
course.
When I was out in public, we have that persona. We have the one that we show everybody and the one that who we really are,
That's
right?
right.
And the one that I really was at night laying in bed was crying because I was so tired of hurting, right? I was so tired of this or so tired of that. And then I would pull up my bootstraps and, all right, let's go to the next day. But as time went on, I realized that that gap of the darkness was getting, smaller and smaller, that space.
Yeah.
And so I
Will
was
you
5 months after the accident, and I did my first race.
yeah, will you kind of quickly tell everybody just your accomplishments, how many races you did and what was your favorite one?
Wow, that's the I I'd have never counted up races. I have probably, if I'm just guessing, 12 or 13 different races.
Couple
Um,
marathons. I
eh,
know marathons for sure.
yeah, did marathons. I did St. George Marathon 3 times. I did the Utah Valley Marathon 3 times. Did their half marathon once. Went down to Southern California a couple times for the opening weekend of professional cycling, where they had a hand cycle division. And so I raced hand cycles. And so, while I really wanted to take first place in the St. George Marathon, it never happened. I got second a couple times, but
That's
never got
amazing.
first place.
That's amazing.
um, but I did win the Utah Valley Marathon. Well, the first time I did it, I was the first and only ever hand cyclist. So I can't say I won that time because I wasn't
Sure you can.
racing anybody but myself. I do remember that race, the big deal on that race. Probably the biggest accomplishment on that race for me was realizing how important support staff is. I had gone, and I was in a hand cycle that was owned by BYU. They loaned it out to me for the summer. I think it was made in 1901. It was solid steel, this beast. I think it weighed like 50 pounds, right? It was not a racing bike
I
by
was
any
going to
means.
say something heavy to push along.
And it wasn't designed for a guy my size. You know, even when I'm in racing shape, and I say this all the time, I am a shape, but I'm not in shape anymore. When I'm in racing shape, I can't get below 225 pounds. It's my body type is just that way. I'm a big dude, right? And that bike was not made for a 225, 230 pound guy. And so I'd be riding down the road and you hear ping, a spoke would pop, right? So I was always replacing spokes or this broke on the bike. But I got to about mile 22 and this was my first marathon. And my wife was actually my support vehicle because I'd never done one before. So they let her on the course and she was just driving ahead of me, just in front of me. And she said, all of a sudden I went from, and at that time I thought I was flying, right? But I was only going like 13 miles an hour, right? It's my first race. So I had no idea. Flying is like 26, 27 miles an hour, right? Which I got to later. But she said I went from like that 12 miles an hour almost down and dropping below 10 miles an hour within just a couple minutes. And she stopped and she's like, are you okay? Well, any endurance athletes know you hit the wall.
Yeah.
I hit a wall.
Usually 20. It's remarkable you hit 22.
I couldn't think. I couldn't do anything. And she's like, what's wrong? And I'm not kidding. I start crying. I don't know what to do. So she knew she goes, when was the last time you gelled up using some performance gel? And I'm like, I don't know. I lost the little thing, right? Because I had a little vial of it that I was supposed to keep with me all the time. I had this like gallon of this stuff in the back of the truck. And so she runs and grabs this. I take a big swig of this, bunch of water. And I go, what do I do? What do I do? And she goes, just start pedaling. Okay, I can do that. So I start pedaling. And I think it was within, 2-3 minutes, all of a sudden everything started coming back online because I had blood sugar.
Right. Yeah.
But I wouldn't have been able to finish that, if you didn't have that. And I think for me, that ties in. Obviously, you can find parallels all over the place to that story.
I love that. I don't know if we're going to get to everything I want to. We might have to do a part 2 to this session.
Okay.
Because there's just so many good things. I want to ask about some of the acts of kindness that pulled you out of that dark. You know what I mean? Are there a couple of people? Be very careful here. That kind of made a difference to have you in that moment where you're like, man, I got to have something to help me get from this place I'm at. Who are a couple of those people and what did they do? Maybe helping our audience get out of our own funks and go help somebody around us.
So I'm going to be very careful because I'm told not to talk about you. So we're just going to say you were one of those, but I'm not going to say anything about it.
Who's the next person?
Right. 2 people come to mind. First of all, we had a neighbor that had been, and he was actually one of the guys that was helping with the tree. Now, before the accident, I was gearing up to go archery bear hunting with my dad and brother in Idaho. And it was supposed to be 2 weeks after the accident was when we were supposed to be in Idaho.
Yeah. I think I might have a recollection.
And obviously
of this.
That did not happen. Nobody went bear hunting that spring. But from the result of the accident is for a long time, my left arm wasn't very usable. For weeks, I couldn't move my arm at all or move my hand or fingers or anything. There was nerve damage in the arm.
Still struggle with it today?
Yeah, I do. I mean, sometimes it gets achy, but most of the time it's a matter of don't have the same dexterity. And so if you were to have a dime on the table and tell me to pick it up with my left hand, I would slide it off to the edge and grab it. Grabbing my credit card, I force myself to grab a card out of my wallet. I always use my left hand. I force myself to do that, trying to keep things going
too often. That's a great way to not spend.
Yeah. And so this hand doesn't have, full functionality to it, but not enough that anybody notices unless I bring it up, right? I recognize that it's not right. So, because of that, and I wanted to try and get back and do archery hunting, even if I had to get hauled back in someplace and dropped off. This neighbor would come down. We had a pretty wide yard that had a backstop to it, and so he would come over and shag arrows, which is grab the arrows for me
Yeah.
so that, because I'm in a wheelchair, right?
Yeah.
And so I'd be down at one end of the yard, and hours, he didn't have to. He came over and was just there to shag arrows and just to kind of check on me. And that was huge.
So simple.
That was huge. Simple act of
So
kindness
simple. Yeah.
that made a big difference. And the other one actually was Kurt Brinkman. So I read that article about him.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in a pretty dark place, struggling. Some of it was because I didn't know anybody else in a wheelchair. I had pushed to get checked out of the hospital too early. And I would always look back and go, I should not have done. Now I look back and go, I should have stayed there a few more weeks, but
Yeah.
I was so tired of the hospital. But that isolated me from that support system. And so I happened to have met his daughter at my very first race, which was a little 5K in Pleasant Grove. And then she asked if I wanted to meet him. And so he and I met outside of a 24-hour fitness there in Linden, Utah. And we spent about an hour, just, I would say knee to knee, but he didn't have knees. He, and he would laugh at that. Just so everybody knows,
Kurt
was awesome.
Yours weren't that great either.
No, he became a good friend of ours until he passed, but he sat there for an hour, didn't have to. And all of a sudden I remember loading my wheelchair in the truck, and I called my wife, and I'm like, oh my gosh, somebody understands, right? I mean, I was so overwhelmed by his kindness that he's actually the one that got me into hand cycle racing. He was a Olympian wheelchair racer. But he's the one that got me connected with BYU, so he had a pretty big impact, not just emotionally, but even then giving me a physical outlet to do something.
Okay, I'm going to promise the audience, I want to do a part 2 with your permission, Mark.
Okay.
As soon as you want to do it, but because I'd like to do a whole session on connections and how relationships changed after this, like this life altering experience. But I want to wrap today with this. If somebody listens to this and they hear it and then they decide to forward it to somebody who just had something really hard happen, or they're just going through something really hard in life, what would you say to that person, regardless of if it's physical or mental or emotional? What would you say to that person who's still in that place that's just hard to get out of? What would your words be to them?
Couple of things. When you're in that spot, I don't think people realize, whether you realize it or not, or whether you're aware of it or not, there are people around you that love and care for you and want you to get better. And the hard part is to trust those individuals, because for me, I felt so vulnerable. But we need to remember that there are those around us that love and care for us, want us to be better, and are waiting and trying to find ways that they can help. The hardest part that I found in my recovery was, I'm a really independent guy. And when you're in a situation like this, it's really, really easy to go from, in our case, it was from husband and wife to patient and caregiver.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's an easy transition, right? Because you're forced. It's a forced transition, right?
Thought of that. That's true.
The hard one is to go back to husband and wife, because in our case, my wife was very protective of me and wanted to help, hates to see me in pain, knows that I'm always having some level of pain from the accident still, 20 years later. And so she wants to do things to help make things easier for me. But as the patient, we want to be able to be more and more independent. So the hard transition is to go back to husband and wife. That is the one that I would encourage people, those that are married, to, whether you're the patient or the caregiver, remember that there's that transition, there's that struggle. The patient wants to be independent, the caregiver still wants to give care. And as the patient side of our relationship, I still 20 years later have to remind myself, she just wants to help, because I'll just do it myself. Mark, what do you want for dinner? Oh, I'll make this. No, she didn't ask what I want to make for dinner. She wanted to make something. And so we have to remember that those people around us care about us, love us, and that those transitions back, we need to have grace for ourselves and for those around us.
Yeah. I love that so much. Okay, wrapping this session up. First of all, I will humbly say you're one of my heroes in this world. You're one of my human heroes, and I can't imagine how many times I've thought in the last 20 years, Joel, why are you whining? Like, and just thought about Mark Merritt and this guy who's just been so resilient. You just turned some page and went on with your life. And maybe it's because I haven't had, knock on wood, that moment where I've had to, but it's just been impressive. So thank you for your time. You're in charge of this thing, so you're going to be able to tell everybody when the next one's coming. I want to have a whole session on connections and how your life has changed, those relationships, how they changed, and maybe that will help those of us who are mediocre with relationships do a little bit better. So thanks so much for letting me be here.
Oh yeah, well, thank you, Joel. I mean, it is a bit of a twist to be on the receiving end,
I like it.
as opposed to the ones asking questions. Thank you, those that have tuned in today. I so appreciate it. I hope there was something that you gathered from this that you can find useful. Yes, we will do a second
We have to.
second episode. Joel and I will figure out that date, and when I get this posted up, I'll make sure I put it on there of when that will work, so that you folks can actually see the next one as well. So thank you very much, Joel. I sure appreciate your time.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And we'll chat here in just
See
a
y'all
couple
again
minutes.
soon. Yeah.